When Stars Collide, the unwritten love story of Lee Min-ho and Song Hye Kyo. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who believes that true love always finds its way back. The night sky of Seoul shimmered like 1,000 diamonds scattered across a black silk canvas. Somewhere above the glowing skyline, destiny was stirring a story that no one could have imagined. A story that would bring together two of Korea's most iconic stars, Lee Min-ho and Song Hye Kyo, in a drama that felt too real to be fiction. It began on a rain-soaked set in the heart of Gangnam. The production crew hustled through puddles as thunder whispered above the city. Cameras were being covered, lights flickered, and amid the storm stood Lee Min-ho, tall and calm, his eyes tracing the horizon like a man waiting for fate itself. The director called for a short break, and that was when she arrived. Song Hye Kyo stepped out of a sleek black car, her umbrella glistening with raindrops that seemed to dance in slow motion. The moment she walked onto the set, the rain softened, as though even the sky wanted to watch. She wore a simple white coat, but her presence carried the weight of elegance, grace, and quiet fire. Min-ho turned, their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, time forgot to move. No one spoke, yet everything was said in that look. It was not scripted, not rehearsed. It was real. The first scene they filmed together was an emotional one. The script demanded tension, heartbreak, and unspoken longing. But as the camera rolled, something extraordinary happened. The air shifted. The world around them disappeared. It was as if Seoul itself had faded, leaving only two souls standing face to face in a universe built just for them. When Min-ho's voice cracked with emotion, and Hye Kyo's eyes glistened with tears that were not part of the act, the crew went silent. Even the director forgot to say cut. After that scene, something changed between them. Days turned into nights, and nights into something more mysterious. They began to share quiet moments when the cameras stopped. He would bring her coffee, always 2 sugars, no cream. She would tease him about his obsession with perfecting every take. They laughed between lines, whispered jokes only they understood, and sometimes, in the stillness of the studio, they would simply sit side by side watching the city lights beyond the glass walls. One evening, after shooting a particularly intense scene, they found themselves alone on the rooftop. The air was cool, and the city hummed softly below. Hye Kyo leaned against the railing, her hair swaying in the gentle breeze. Min-ho stood beside her, looking out at the endless ocean of lights. "Do you ever feel like we're just characters in someone else's story?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Min-ho smiled faintly. "Maybe," he said. "But if we are, I'd still want to be written into yours." Her heart fluttered in a way she hadn't felt in years. It was not the scripted affection of the drama. It was something raw, real, dangerous in its simplicity. The next morning, the scene they filmed required them to part ways. It was supposed to be heartbreaking, but something about it felt almost prophetic. As she walked away from him on camera, Hye Kyo felt an ache deep within her chest, as if the character she was playing had disappeared and only she remained. Min-ho's expression was unreadable, but his eyes followed her long after the director had called cut. Weeks passed. The drama neared its end. Rumors began to swirl in the entertainment world about their chemistry, their closeness, their stolen glances during interviews. But the truth was something no headline could capture. One night, after the final wrap, the cast and crew celebrated at a quiet riverside restaurant. Laughter filled the air, music played softly, and the stars above seemed brighter than ever. Min-ho and Hye Kyo slipped away from the crowd and wandered toward the riverbank. The Han River reflected the city like a mirror of dreams. He handed her a small paper boat he had folded himself. "For all the moments we never got to live on screen," he said. She took it, smiling. "And for the ones we still might," she replied. They released the boat into the water and watched it drift under the moonlight. The river carried it away, slow and graceful, until it vanished into the distance. Neither spoke again. They didn't need to. The silence between them was louder than words. Months later, when the drama aired, audiences across Asia were mesmerized. Every scene between them pulsed with a chemistry that felt otherworldly. Fans flooded social media with messages about their breathtaking connection, calling it magic, fate, the story that never ends. But behind the screens, somewhere in the quiet corners of Seoul, Lee Min-ho and Song Hye Kyo carried that story in their hearts. They had walked through rain, laughter, and unspoken dreams. And though the cameras had stopped rolling, the movie between them played on in the unseen spaces of memory. Sometimes, on cold nights when the moon rose over the city, she would remember his smile. Sometimes, when he looked out over the Han River, he would remember her laughter. And maybe, just maybe, the universe had written them not as actors on a set, but as two stars destined to collide in the sky of forever. Their story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The drama was over. The cameras had gone silent, the crew had moved on, and the city of Seoul returned to its familiar rhythm. But for Lee Min-ho and Song Hye Kyo, nothing was the same anymore. Something had been left unfinished, like a scene that ended too soon, a heartbeat that refused to fade. It was early autumn when their paths crossed again. The sky was painted in shades of amber and gold, the air crisp and scented with fallen leaves. Hye Kyo had just finished a magazine shoot near Bukchon Hanok Village. As she walked through the narrow alleys, her steps slow and graceful, she caught the faint sound of laughter, familiar, deep, and warm. She turned, and there he was. Lee Min-ho stood a few meters away, holding a script in one hand, his eyes widening in disbelief. Time seemed to pause between them once more. The same invisible thread that had tied them months ago pulled tight again. "Hye Kyo," he said softly, as if saying her name might break the spell. "Min-ho," she replied, her lips curving into a small, surprised smile. "It's been a while." He nodded, his expression unreadable but his eyes telling 1,000 stories. "Too long," he said quietly. They walked together through the ancient streets, the soft rhythm of their footsteps echoing against the wooden walls of the hanoks. The sun began to dip lower, painting the world in amber light. They talked about work, travel, trivial things that hid the emotions swirling beneath their calm exteriors. But as the conversation drifted, Min-ho stopped walking. He turned to her, his gaze steady. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked. She hesitated. "About what?" "That night," he said. "The one by the river. The paper boat." A small smile touched her lips, but her eyes betrayed the warmth behind it. "Sometimes," she said softly. "When I pass by the Han River, I wonder where it went." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it's still floating somewhere. Maybe it found another shore." The silence that followed was electric, filled with all the things they didn't say. Then, as if fate had planned it, his phone rang. The director of a new film wanted to meet him, a romance, set in Paris, a story about two strangers whose lives intertwined by chance. Hye Kyo's name appeared on the script too. She had already been cast as the female lead. For a moment, they both laughed in disbelief. The universe had done it again. A month later, they were on a plane to France. The sky outside was endless blue, and the world beneath looked like a painting. Hye Kyo sat by the window, her fingers tracing the clouds beyond the glass. Min-ho watched her quietly, his thoughts a mixture of nostalgia and hope. When they landed in Paris, the city greeted them with the fragrance of coffee and rain. The Eiffel Tower shimmered in the distance like a promise. Their hotel overlooked the Seine River, and at night, the lights of the city reflected in the water like falling stars. The filming began the next morning. Their first scene together took place on a quiet bridge at dawn. She was supposed to walk past him without looking back, but something about the moment felt too real. As she passed him, the director shouted cut, but she stopped, turned around, and met Minho's eyes. It wasn't in the script, yet it felt like the most honest thing she had ever done. The director was silent for a long moment, then said softly, "Keep it. That's the one." As the weeks passed, the line between acting and reality blurred again. They shared laughter in Parisian cafes, wandered through art galleries at night, and stood on bridges watching the city glow beneath them. There was a warmth in their silence, a quiet companionship that neither fame nor distance could touch. One evening, after filming a rain scene near Montmartre, they sought shelter in a small bookstore. The lights were dim, the air filled with the scent of old paper and rain-soaked cobblestones. She picked up a poetry book and opened it at random. "Listen to this," she said, her voice soft. "We meet again not by chance, but by the echo of a promise whispered long ago." Min-ho smiled. "Sounds like us," he said. Hye Kyo looked up at him. "Does it?" He nodded. "I think we've been finding each other for longer than we realize." For a moment, neither moved. The sound of the rain outside blended with the faint hum of the city. And in that quiet bookstore, surrounded by forgotten stories, they wrote another chapter of their own. But every story has a twist, and theirs was no different. When the movie wrapped, both received offers from across the world. New roles, new horizons, new dreams. She was set to film in New York, and he was bound for Tokyo. Their paths, once so perfectly intertwined, began to drift apart again. On their last night in Paris, they stood by the river, the water glimmering under the silver moonlight. He looked at her and said, "If we meet again, somewhere, someday, don't walk past me this time." She smiled, a tear glistening in her eye. "Only if you promise not to let me." The next morning, she was gone. Her flight left before dawn, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume in the hotel hallway. Minho stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the city, holding the poetry book she had left on his nightstand. A paper boat, folded from one of its pages, rested on top. Months later, the film was released. Audiences around the world wept, mesmerized by the raw emotion between them. Critics called it lightning caught on film. But those who truly looked beyond the screen could feel it, that their love story had never been fiction. And somewhere, across time and distance, the echo of forever continued to call them back to each other. Because some stars, no matter how far they drift, are destined to meet again. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, let me know in the comments what part stayed with you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your theories about where destiny will take Lee Min-ho and Hye Kyo next.